Hi everyone, hope you're having a fantastic week on planet Earth. Today we'll be making another type of island cliff diorama with a river running down the front of it. I feel like these should have a more proper name than the generic names I'm coming up with, but I can't quite figure out a reasonable name I like. Like, should these have an abstract name like Two Sheep in a Corral or just Island Cliffs? I'm leaning towards just Island Cliffs, it's more simpler, I guess. In this one I finally figured out how to produce clear water with my resin, and so I'm optimistic I can do it again with my future dioramas. But anyways, hope you guys enjoy. We're going to start off by cutting out our landforms using XPS foam and a hot wire table. If all you have is a knife, that's fine, it just might be a little more messy. Also, you want to be wearing a respirator to not breathe in some of these fumes, or a lot of these particles. I figured out where I wanted my river before I set up my land pieces. I was initially planning on just having a singular river stream, but I ended up making a fork in the river later. I feel like I added a little more character to the diorama since I didn't have like a cave or anything this time. It's all about that character. Here's all of the pieces before they were glued down. One thing I wish I did was shape the cliffs that are on each side of the pillar, holding up the archway more so that it would have been easier to apply the sculpt mold and paint the rocks there. It was a pretty tight and awkward fit to be painting around there. Also, I ended up removing that second pillar in the back of the scene to make more room for shaping and painting because it was just in the way. Rip to that pillar, he did not make it to 2020. Once our pieces are how you like them, we can begin brushing all the pieces where glue will be applied with a wire brush. This will just help the glue stick better to the foam. Don't worry about perfectly gluing the pieces how they were, it doesn't need to be perfect, and it will probably add more character to your scene if the pieces are imperfect. That's one of the reasons why I get down with nature dioramas. Once everything is glued down, we can just add some weight to the bigger pieces to keep the glue from shifting or rising too much. After the glue is dried, we can start carving away the sharp edges to our cliffs and any other landforms. I try to carve away most of the sharp edges on top and then carve into the cliffs to add more character. If you didn't carve away anything, your cliffs would look too sharp and clean with the sculpt mold, making it look kind of off. But if that's the look you're going for, by all means, do it. I was going to add a little pond like in my last diorama here again, but I ended up covering it up with sculpt mold and forgetting about it until later when I was wondering where my pond wandered off to. Once our land is carved, we can apply our sculpt mold. I usually make my mold pretty mushy because I think it helps shape around the landscape easier. We can just throw on the sculpt mold at first and then slowly start to mold it onto the scene. Before the mold really starts to harden in like 20 or 30 minutes, I try to get more difficult areas molded like near the archway or smoothing out the ground. If you have enough time or you're just not lazy like me, you can try carving the cliffs, but large portions of the mold may be pulled away from the scene while it's still curing.
No sense leaving the story of a lifetime untold, Captain.
I basically never sculpt my cliffs until after the mold is already cured, but to sculpt them after I just apply a little bit of water over them and just begin shaping the cliffs with more round edges and getting rid of the plaster look when I first applied the mold. I just look for existing features in the cliffs and just reshape them. After our scene is sculpted, we can begin the fun part, painting. I like to use this Craftsmart burnt umber for the base layer of paint for the ground and dilute it with water to help fill in all of the white. It's dark and it looks like chocolate frosting when it's dry, which might be a bad thing if you're actively trying to avoid sugary foods like me. I'll be using a diluted gray paint mixed with a tiny amount of black to make a darker base layer of gray to paint on my cliffs. It's fine to brush this base layer on, but for the other layers of paint we'll be dabbing the paint on randomly. Also, don't be afraid to paint over the brown to meld the landscape pieces together. I used to do that and I ended up with that old video game look where the terrain doesn't blend in properly and it's just a sudden and noticeable shift in scenery. Sorry for the sudden camera shift, but I decided to spend a little coin on a little lighting upgrade for my lamp so it's not blindingly bright all the time. I just invested in a piece of paper towel and some duct tape. Hopefully the lighting is more softer and easier to look at for now. For the second layer of cliff paint, we'll be using this concrete color and just dabbing it on. I just used the paint that's on the lid of these containers because I don't want to apply too much paint to the scene. Next, we can apply this stone gray paint and dab it on randomly as well. After I apply the brown paint that's next, I forgot to brush on the white paint to highlight the details in the cliff. I barely remembered how much I like its effects as I'm editing the whole video right now. For the final layer, I used this other burnt umber paint because it's a lighter shade of brown and I apply it anywhere dirt could be sitting on the cliffs. I think I applied too much than I usually do and I would definitely apply a little less paint to the areas next time. But it's your diorama if you're actually making it, so you can do it however you want. You can smash the whole thing on the floor right now if you wanted to. Or launch it in a cannon, shoot it into space, or throw it in a river. Now that everything is painted, we can apply the dirt with diluted matte Mod Podge to help get the glue in the ground and use some store-bought sifted dirt. Just kidding, you can just get some dirt from wherever you are and sift it. The more you sift it, the finer your dirt will be. Before we apply our static grass, we need to figure out where our trees will go so the whole scene isn't covered up with grass, which was what I almost did this time. I imagine this area would have a decent amount of trees since it's right next to a river, so I made sure to make enough holes for the trees to be placed. We'll be using full strength matte Mod Podge and applying the glue around where the trees will be, as well as applying glue on the majority of the ground because I wanted to make the scene more vibrant. This is 2mm light green static grass. I made sure my work area was clean so I can retrieve whatever leftover static grass there was. Here I'm applying a small amount of glue again because I like to use this 4mm static grass as well next to the 2mm. Again, this is 4mm green static grass, and I cleaned up my work area again so I can retrieve any leftovers.
This program to bring you a special bulletin.
The biggest and boldest robbery in the history of New York.
These are just the various types of foliage and turf I'll be using to complete my scene. We'll start off by sprinkling the light green turf and then the green turf around areas where it's mainly just the dirt by itself. I just sprinkle enough where it's not blatantly noticeable, but it still contributes to the scene. Like if some little kid seen this in a store, they wouldn't be like, "Damn mama, that's a lot of turf." Here I'm just applying the green turf. I don't sprinkle as much green turf as I did the light green because I'm trying to get that autumn vibe going where the plants are starting to die. Also, I'll be placing the bushes after I place my trees so they're not in the way. Here I'm just adding some pebbles I saved from the sifted dirt to add into my river. Now we can add some isopropyl alcohol and scenic glue to the scene to help glue everything in place. After everything is dried, we can start preparing the river for the resin with some duct tape and a hot glue gun. I use tabletop epoxy resin that uses a 50-50 ratio of hardener and epoxy. Where I've been messing up with my resin being too bubbly and not looking clear is because I've been stirring the resin too vigorously. I guess when you try stirring it fast and with a lot of force, you introduce a lot of bubbles into the resin, which starts to make it look cloudy. For the resin dye, I'm using this ocean blue translucent dye. You just need a small amount of dye to get the color you want. I ended up overfilling my river with the resin, as you'll see later when the resin started to even out. It wasn't too bad, but it made a part of my beach look kind of like marshland. Here at the end you'll see where the resin overflowed, but I really liked how clear the river was at least. I'm applying gloss Mod Podge for my river water effects first, so when I place my trees they won't be in the way. I was really aiming for a relatively calm flowing river this time, so I didn't apply so much glue that it created noticeable ripples. Before gluing the trees down, I figured out exactly which trees I wanted and where they would go before I glued them down. I'll be using full strength matte Mod Podge again to glue the trees down. This glue will dry clear, so don't worry about using a lot. Just make sure there's enough to keep your tree in place. Now to finally place our bushes, we'll be using this coarse turf. I personally like the scale of the coarse turf, and it can easily be manipulated if you want more or less bushes scale wise. Now we can finally seal in our bushes with isopropyl alcohol and scenic glue. Also, I guess I didn't record me applying the scenic glue, but I applied it after this isopropyl alcohol. Now we can just add the finishing touch of some sedimentary lines and we're all finished. Thank you guys for watching if you watched all of that. There was a few minor hiccups, but I think overall it came out pretty good. If you enjoyed and want to see more, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time. Have a great week, people, and peace out.